All right, the recording should have started now. You're free to begin.
You can see the screen?
Yes.
Very good. Yeah, here we have, there's two parcels. Their addresses are 4612 and 4610 Bayard Street. Before I get onto that, let me introduce the team real quick. Myself, I'm Tom Swisher. I'm with Farringer McCarty Gray. Brian Almeter is with Farringer McCarty Gray as well. And then we have Blake Stanton and Austin Henry that are representing Sterling Land. They're the Sterling Land owns the property. So as I was saying, there's two lots here on Bayard. The photo here is showing the two lots between the two apartment buildings, and Oakland Catholic is the blank wall you see straight ahead. Oops. The project's really to basically, we kind of see this project as a win-win-win for everyone. It's a win for the residents of Oakland. It's a win for the residents of Bayard Manor, and it's a win for the landowners as well. The purpose of the property is to build 44 parking spaces. It's basically secure off-street parking. There'll be an electric gate at the entrance. There's 44 spaces. The 44 spaces will be screened from Bayard with 2 trees that exist on the property that are to remain, 2 new street trees, as well as shrubs and some fencing. The parking lot's really to lessen the burden and maximize the open street parking. Basically, we can pull 44 cars off the street, allowing more parking for more residents in the area, as well as for the businesses in the area. This will actually also create a better secure parking area for the residents of Bayard Manor, which is the apartment building to the left sitting on Bayard. It's basically the one parcel to the right has been for quite a few years a gravel parking lot. This project will really enhance the area, green the area up. It's going to incorporate shade trees as shown on the plan, and there will be stormwater management. And as I was kind of touching base there, these two parcels have had parking on them throughout quite a few years, as you see is in this aerial photo from 1957. It was actually part of a larger parking lot, kind of where Oakland Catholic sat. It stretched into the one parcel. This from 1993 shows I don't quite understand why 93 is blurrier than 57, but anyhow, the cars are shown on both lots. There's about 8 to 10 parking spaces on each lot. And in 2022, this aerial photo is prior to the demolition of the building that's shown. That building has already been raised. The whole lot is actually gravel right now. And this shows how I was stating that the one lot was always gravel, has been gravel parking for a handful of years. And you can see in the top right corner of the parcels, there's an electric gate that's already there. There's going to be a new gate installed with the new parking lot. And there was actually 8 parking spaces behind the existing structure that was raised. The proposed parking lot is to take advantage of the existing curb cut that went into the gravel parking lot with the electric gate. We would align right directly with this entrance. You can utilize the existing curb cut. And this picture on the bottom shows the Bayard Manor building that's next to the properties that's owned by Sterling Land. There's an existing service entrance here that goes in behind the building. That service drive will remain and be detached from these two parcels and be separated by a fence. There's going to be a little bit of a elevation change. It's not very big, but we don't really want people walking down over the slight embankment into the parking lot. As you can kind of see, existing parking on the property throughout the years has kind of been pushed out to the borders and been very close to the neighboring buildings and property lines within 5 feet. So as I was saying, the proposed parking lot consists of 44 parking spaces. There will be 2 ADA parking spaces right up along the street. The access will be controlled by an electric gate. Parking lot is to serve the residents of Bayard Manor. There will be stormwater that'll be underground and it'll be infiltrating. And it'll be taking up this area underneath the parking lot. And that'll meet city code. And the screening along Bayard Street will meet city code. And as I was stating earlier, the landscaping and the shade trees, there'll be a hedgerow along Bayard Manor. There'll be 2 existing street trees to remain in that area. 2 new trees will be added, as well as 9 trees throughout the parking lot to meet the city requirements for 1 tree per 5 parking spaces. And the central greenway here will act a little bit as a stormwater. Most of the water will come in this direction and go into this one inlet, and there will be an inlet out here as well. So right now we're at the beginning of the process. We've submitted to city planning, and it triggered this meeting here. And so now we're meeting with all of you, the community groups. We'll be resubmitting to zoning design development review. We'll be responding to the comments. We've already been in contact with the city about the stormwater, and we've been in contact with PWSA about the connections. We're coordinating the zoning variances and special exemptions with the planning department, and we'll be attending a zoning hearing board here shortly. And we'll be looking forward to obtaining approvals and then constructing the improvements. And that's, if there's any more input from the team before we open it to questions.
So we do have a number of raised hands and comments in the chat. I will go to the first question. It says, if not yet answered in the presentation, what is happening to the 2 mature trees in the area?
Yeah, they're both staying. Yep, they're staying. This is one of them, and this is one of them. These 2 trees right here will both remain.
The next question is, are there any new shade trees, species native to Pittsburgh?
Yes, actually, to meet the stormwater requirements, to assist in our stormwater design for the city code, we're proposing all native trees. The 2 trees that are there, tulip poplars. We're basically looking at doing serviceberry, some common hackberry, common hackberry, Atilia. Yeah, right now everything that's proposed is native to meet it'll assist us in our stormwater as well as be, better for the neighborhood and better for the region.
Okay. And in follow-up, trees on that block will be a welcome addition. What type of fencing will be on Bayard?
I missed the end of that. What was that? I'm sorry.
What type of fencing will be along the Bayard Street frontage?
Per city code, it's tends to be ornamental. Right now, there's ornamental in front of Bayard Manor. It might match that. I'm not really exactly sure. We haven't really spec'd a fence yet.
Okay. And then the next question from the Q&A tool is, will you be putting in additional lighting and will the lot be fenced in?
I heard the lighting part. I'm sorry, I missed the end again.
I'm sorry. Will you be putting in additional lighting and will the lot be fenced in?
Right now, we're proposing a fence on the left. If you're looking at the plan right now, we're proposing a fence along this perimeter, some fencing with the hedgerow out here. This side is going to have a guardrail at this time, and this is a little bit of a wall, so it's really not really accessible between these 2 lots this way and that way. Once with the small retaining wall and the guide rail, it's going to basically be a barrier. And there is already an existing fence along this whole the back lot against Oakland Catholic. And yes, it will be lit. We're just starting the photometrics process right now.
Tom, this is Austin Henry. I'm sorry, but I believe the one question was about fencing along Bayard, and you answered with the fencing between the property and Bayard Manor.
Right. Yeah, there's a hedgerow out here, and there will be some fencing. City code requires 80% opaque, either with hedge or fence. So we're going to work out a system between the two to create the barrier that the city would require.
Okay. We do have a series of questions in the chat. The first question is, has the number of units at the Bayard Manor increased? Is there some fresh need for new parking spaces or additional units?
No, there's no changes proposed or happening at Bayard Manor. It still has the same amount of units.
The next question is, if Bayard Manor residents do not fill all the spaces in the proposed lot, do the owners intend to offer leases to the general public?
I think that's open for, I'm not exactly sure. We haven't, we anticipated most would be taken by the residents. There's like 31 apartments, I believe. Blake, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So we're, and there's students, a lot of students. And so there's multiple people in each apartment, and most of them have cars nowadays. So we're feeling most of this is going to be Bayard Manor residents.
And employees who work at the Bayard Manor.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. That's right.
Okay. And then the third question in the chat box is there project seeking a variance or zoning change? What is the argument for why this parking lot is necessary?
Yes, there, per the review from the city, we do have some exemptions and variances that we'll be needing to go after. The argument for the proposed development is basically to alleviate parking burden in the neighborhood, especially for the Bayard Manor residents. By alleviating their parking issue, it'll help alleviate parking issues for others in the neighborhood. And it's to basically kind of dress up and improve the lots as they are today, bringing them to a more aesthetic standard and actually helping out with stormwater. Everything's pretty much an improvement. The looks, the stormwater, it'll be screened.
Can you speak specifically to the variances or adjustments that you need?
I think right now, if I can jump in just a minute while Tom's looking, we're working with the city planning department to determine the exact relief for the parking lot. And some of the questions that city planning department has raised regarding use and setback and other requirements that we don't think are maybe not necessarily applicable to this parking lot as a accessory use to Bayard Manor. Tom, you can go into some of the ones I know we have to date.
Yeah, to date, some of this, like Brian was just saying, because Bayard Manor is the primary use and it's on a separate parcel, and these two parcels are actually in a different zoning district, so it kind of brings it into another realm of the zoning review. So basically, accessory off-site, which we're questioning whether that's really viable. the parking lot in use in different zoning districts. So like I said, Bayard Manor itself is in the Oakland's public realm. And this parcel, and these two parcels are in the residential high. Oh, I just lost that. It's,
Multi-unit,
high density.
yeah,
thank you. And so then we have landscaping and screening standards, which we're meeting on along Bayard, but the other three borders would not meet per the zoning code. The within parking within the setback. Parking in the RM district. And then there's the off-site parking as well as the entrance within 60 feet of an intersection, which they stated that because we're directly across from Melwood. And those are the ones that we're aware of at this time. And like I said, we wanted to have some conversations with city planning to try to work through a few of these before we go to zoning hearing board. Because like Brian was saying, with the accessory use, some of the things that they brought into, couple of the things they brought into is minimum parking requirements and minimum bicycle parking requirements and loading within 15 feet of property zone. And all that's really dealing with Bayard Manor. And as I stated, there's no improvements proposed for Bayard Manor, and it's the primary use. This is all the accessory use. So.
Okay. I don't see any hands raised at the moment, but there are a couple more follow-up questions in the Q&A tool. One question specifically is, what is the net increase in parking spaces? And in parentheses, 44 minus existing spaces.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one to answer, because the lot that was gravel before didn't really have any marked spaces. And I don't know, Blake, if you can answer. There was basically 8 spaces behind the building before. On the one lot, and then the gravel lot really didn't really have any defined spaces. It was a gravel lot.
Correct.
So I don't really know how to do the math on that one, to be honest with you.
The next question in the Q&A tool, which I think you answered just a few minutes ago, but what variances from the city code are you requesting?
Yeah, it's the ones I went over.
And then when do you expect to go before the zoning board? When do you expect to start the work? And when do you expect work to be completed?
The zoning board, we'd like to schedule that as soon as possible, but we really want to have a conversation with the planning department first before we submit our official application for the zoning hearing board. But we anticipate that in a month or two, and then expect to start work once we get zoning approval and stormwater approval. Everything's a few months out before getting all the approvals. So we'd like to be able to start and complete by fall/winter this year.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part? You like that it would start when and have
Basically, once we get all the approvals, which are pretty much the next few months, and then basically start construction sometime in the summertime and have it finished by fall/winter.
Very good, thank you. And then the next question from the Q&A tool, are Bayard Manor residents limited to the number of vehicles/units to ensure new parking lot could accommodate parking demand?
Blake, I think that's a question directed at you.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. Could you just repeat that so I make sure I understand?
I can
Sorry.
actually ask the question. Hi.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's okay. So I was curious about, are there measures in place where residents are limited to the number of vehicles they can have per apartment, to ensure that the parking lot expansion that you're putting in place would be able to accommodate parking demand?
Well, we don't have a requirement that you can only have so many cars. There's some units that have a tenant with one car, and sometimes there's a couple that have two cars. So, but we don't have a limit to the number of cars that a tenant can bring with them when they rent a unit in the Bayard Manor. Did I answer that correctly?
You did. The curiosity there is that with a lot of transportation demand management, parking mitigation, congestion mitigation, one of the things we're trying to do is encourage folks, if you don't have to have multiple vehicles, consider that, look at other transportation alternatives. So I was curious about what your policies were, especially when you're looking at the project of expanding a parking lot to accommodate parking.
Right. I'm not aware of any code in the multifamily industry where you can set a standard with regards to how many cars you can have. Some tenants don't have cars. They use public transportation. They're at the universities and they don't have cars. And others, there could be a couple that have two cars.
I think, Blake, that the question goes to how many cars are you going to allow to utilize these spaces for each unit? Is that what the question's more geared towards?
Thank you. Yes, that works.
Okay. We hadn't thought about that. If we could limit it to one or two per unit, if that is something that the community group feels strongly about, but it's not something we've taken into consideration before.
Do you think the new expansion of the parking lot would basically, it's greater than the demand for the tenants in the building, for example, that you will have excess parking that would be open to the public? This question may have been asked before.
Yeah, we don't anticipate being open to the public. Basically, there's 31 units with multiple people in the units. So and there could be multiple cars per unit. So there's 31 units, 44 parking spaces, and there's a few employees for Sterling Land that work in Bayard Manor that will be parking here as well. So
we do think it will alleviate the cars on the street.
Correct.
And Mavis, did you want to ask your question about traffic impacts during construction?
Yes, thank you. I know that the plan is to begin late summer?
Correct.
Okay, can you share if you anticipate any traffic impacts during construction?
We don't anticipate doing any street cutting. There's an existing lateral that goes into the combined sewer, so we can connect our storm into that. So we will not have to go into the street to do any construction. Everything will be behind the existing sidewalk into the parcels. So other than some vehicles coming and going, there's really no impact to the street.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then there are two more questions in the Q&A tool. The first is, do the occupancy permits for the two properties state the number of parking spaces allowed currently? And I think you started to answer a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's actually, I believe the one parcel has 8 and the one has 3, and that's off the top of my head right now. I did not look it up. But there are spaces for the existing, and those were related to the structures that were present or previously on site.
Okay. And then the next question is, will the electric gate system have an audio function, i.e., please take your ticket, etc.? If so, will it be heard 24/7?
The gate's actually gonna be, basically when someone, like one of the residents is, gets a parking space on the lot, they'll be given like a badge, a pass, kind of like a hotel, electronic hotel key. It would just be swiped, at the reader. There would, just be cars coming and go, and there's really no tickets. It's not like a pay lot as you go. So I don't anticipate any audio. Blake, is there any audio anticipated?
There is no audio anticipated, and you described correctly. It'll be a swipe card or fob, and they'll go in and out of the lot.
Yeah, and back to the question, I believe there is no intention for leasing or allowing the general public to use these spaces. These spaces are intended to be used solely by the residents of Bayard Manor, and depending on that number, employees of Sterling at Bayard Manor, and that's the extent of it.
And then the last question, I'll just state it for the recording. And again, I think you already started to answer this. Do you anticipate that all spaces will be leased to Bayard Manor residents, or will there be parking by the hour for transients in the neighborhood? So I just wanted to make sure that that question was asked on the recording.
Yeah, no public parking is intended.
And again, I'm not seeing any raised hands, but we do have a few more questions in the chat, and I can go to the chat now. Okay, so I'm gonna read, Andrea, do you want to come off mute to ask your questions?
Hi, sorry. Yes, I apologize. I don't mean to put you through so much labor here. I was just not able to put my questions into the Q&A, and I apologize for that.
No worries.
I had asked the question about whether or not the project was seeking a variance or a zoning change, and why, what is the argument for why it's necessary? And Sharonda, you read my question asking why is the parking lot necessary? And the question was not about why the parking side, it is ambiguous in that case, right? Sorry about that. My question was not about why the parking lot is necessary. The question that I had was why the variances are necessary, and can the owners not explain why using the property consistent with its existing zoning is impossible?
If you can see the screen right now,
Yeah.
the biggest things are the setbacks, which the dashed lines are the setback lines. If we put a parking lot within this, it basically becomes a non-feasible project. The cost to do the project, to do the stormwater, it doesn't really alleviate the parking demand that Bayard Manor has. It just, it's just not a feasible project. Basically do stormwater, paving, lighting, the gates, and all the landscaping that would be required. So that's part of that, that's the setbacks issue. The others are the historic nature of the two lots were already had parking to the borders. On the three of the borders, parking was already to the parcel lot lines. We're actually assisting in making it better out along Bayard and screening it. So, we're trying to alleviate the ones that everyone can see. And some of these are just out of our control, like the parking in the RM district, off-site parking, because the city wanted us to associate it with a building, so we became an accessory use. And the landscaping and screening standards, we're doing it on the Bayard side, but we're not doing it on the three sides, building the lot out as much as we can. And the parcels, we're already doing that in the past. And kind of want to go back. If you notice this the backside of Oakland Catholic has like one window. There's really no one really looking out this at all. This building has a few windows, but there's really no residents in this area or no one looking out these windows. This is Bayard Manor. They're the ones going to be utilizing the parking lot, so I don't think they'll be mind looking at it. The neighboring building here has been previously for years looking at an empty gravel lot. So I think with the trees added, the landscaping added, it's going to be a benefit for everyone.
My next questions were written at a time when the question from the Q&A was asking for an estimate of the net increase in parking spaces.
Mhm.
And you had said that it was sort of impossible for you to do the math to figure out how many spaces there were. And my question that I wrote then in the chat is it really not possible to estimate how many cars routinely park in the gravel lot? And does Bayard Manor not issue permits? Like, do you currently have no control over how many people park there?
Blake, do you have an idea how many cars were using that lot when it was just a gravel lot?
Well, I mean, it varies by the day and what's going on. So, and right now we don't have control of the gate, so it's used as a public access. There's people that park there that we don't have any control over. But it really varies by day how many cars are parked on the gravel lot.
How many were like previously there when it was a gravel lot before the other structure was raised?
I would say 16 on average.
So there was 16 plus 8, that would have been 24. So it's a net increase of 20.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that the depth of the property is about 150 foot deep. So 150 foot divided by 9 foot wide spaces is about 16 to 17 cars in one row. And then, as you mentioned, Tom, the 8 or 9 on the lot to the right were there previously as well.
There was like 8 spaces right here.
So I had a couple other questions, which is whether or not Bayard Manor employees or tenants will be paying for the permits to park in this lot.
Will the tenants pay to park in the lot?
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be a fee to park in the lot.
And the Bayard Manor employees?
We typically don't charge our employees to park in the lot.
And you don't intend to going forward, they're just going to be issued.
I don't think we'll charge our employees to park.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A tool. I don't see any more questions in the chat. And no other participants have their hands raised. If there aren't any other questions or comments, we can end this portion of the meeting.
I just thank you everyone for your time. Appreciate the input.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
Bye now.
You as well.
Yeah.